Hello, Julia. How are you?
Hi. Good.
Good.
Yeah,
Thank
good.
you. Thank you for doing this. Would you share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you for interviewing me, and I've really appreciated your other interviews, and I just hope mine can be helpful to people.
Hmm.
Um, I'm gonna give like first a background of like my life before I ever knew about meeting, because I think like the whole lens that I saw meeting through was based on my life, my whole life, not just my what I experienced in meetings. So me and my husband Johnny, we live in Canada in Sarnia. That's where we have been for all of our meeting life. But I was born in the States, actually in Vermont,
Hmm.
and that's where my father was from. So my mom wasn't married to my father, and like he had a lot of issues. You know, he was an alcoholic and had trouble with drugs and things like that. So,
Hmm.
um, because he was abusive towards her, she left him when I was 2 years old, but he still had the right to see me, you know, occasionally with
Hmm.
like his mom had to be there like to watch over me like while I was with
Okay.
him.
Hmm.
But like at that point he had already said like some really weird things to my mom that made her sort of feel like maybe he was a pedophile, which seems so she was already trying to sort of get me out of the she wanted me to know him like for the good aspects of who he was, but also wanted to make sure I was safe. So she
Hmm.
trusted my grandmother at the time. So something happened. Like I have no memory of my father at all, basically, except for pictures. Yeah, like I don't really have any memory, but something happened like in my daycare situation where like they said that they think I'm being sexually abused. So my
Wow.
mom was like got welfare and stuff like that, and to get it she had to like I had to get checks, you know, like they were
Hmm.
concerned about the children involved and stuff. So I ended up in like free counseling for people
Hmm.
that like the school or whatever was concerned about something in their life and they were
Hmm.
just trying to get to the bottom of it. So like that involved like dolls that were supposed to represent you and different people in your life, and you
Hmm.
could show like the things that had happened between,
Hmm.
and I really don't remember that much other than these
Hmm.
dolls. Like that's
Hmm.
the most that I remember, because this is all under the age of 5. So
Right.
that this is happening. So yeah, my and because I think I just blocked a lot of my memory of that time of my life
Okay.
out. And so then I ended up with police officers and they had the dolls too. So that's what I remember,
Hmm.
like doing something with the dolls. Like I think I totally
Hmm.
disassociated from even, so that whatever happened there resulted in my father getting a warning and my mom choosing to leave the country. That
Hmm.
was like what I felt like what I had done had made it that, you know, we have to leave the
Wow.
country. So,
Hmm.
and so because, and I think the reason my mom couldn't really explain it to me, but she just didn't want him to have access to me anymore. And there wasn't a lot, like, it was pretty clear that something was going on, but there wasn't a lot that the law could do.
Hmm.
And then it sort of made it more dangerous for us to have someone angry now, too. And, you
Right.
know, so
Yeah.
we went to live with my grandparents in Canada at that point,
Hmm.
and like my father had no interest in contacting me, and I had no interest in contacting him, and I just thought this was the normal life. Like
Hmm.
in my little brain, I was just like, and I really liked the comfort of living with my grandparents, and um I sort of forgot about the whole thing, except I would have like breakdowns like once a month, where I would feel like guilty for doing something that might have gotten my father in trouble. I remember,
Oh, sure.
so like I would tell my mom like I'm sorry, like I don't know what I did, and like just I was really
Um,
concerned about him having a bad life. Like I just remember
Mm.
that was the only um but I didn't remember anything else. So then we lived with my grandparents for quite a few years after that. And my mom, it was really nice for me and safe, like the safest environment I had been in. But I think for my
Mhm.
mom, it was really, really hard. And I just
Okay.
want to say this whole time, like my mom is so loving and
Mhm.
so like I'm so lucky to have her. She like
Mm.
although we were involved in these very weird situations, she's like always shown me love, believed me.
Mhm.
And I don't want to make her sound like a crazy person or anything. I'm just more putting the facts out there. There's a lot
Yep.
of background of how she got in that situation and stuff that I can't
Mhm.
don't have time to say. But anyways,
Mhm.
um so then with my grandparents, my mom, I feel like she was in school to become a nurse. She couldn't really have time like a lot, but she really wanted to find a way to make enough money, to
Mhm.
live and support us. And she wanted to have her own home someday.
Mhm.
And my grandparents were trying their best to support her, but like it was hard because she was working and in school, and they were more like my parents. So it was like more we were treated like siblings, which I think was really hard on my mom too.
Oh, sure.
And like she couldn't even groceries. Like my mom would save up money to get things that my grandparents didn't like to eat because they
Mhm.
ate just totally different than
Mhm.
and that was what they thought was good for them, but she wanted me to experience different cultures, different food, and so just things like that.
Mhm.
I remember that was the only hard part. I knew my mom was miserable, like even though she was thankful, she was also like not doing well in that environment. And so I think she was always looking for a way out, but didn't have time for like counseling or any of
Mhm.
the things to process like what had happened to her, like what was going on with me. She just didn't have time. And I don't really blame her for that. So she ended up falling in love with a male nurse at the hospital that she was working. And
Mhm.
so we moved out to the country, like out far away from my grandparents for a while, and he had a son, and that was another abusive situation. So
Mm.
both of us, like things happened, and I'm not going to go into details, but it was
Mhm.
like pretty secluded, and like it was like a slow situation where it just became like really bad.
Mm.
But it was like we weren't I sort of like not I didn't realize that it was going to be that bad when it started, and it got really bad. So that resulted like 8 months into us leaving in the middle of the night,
Wow.
garbage bags in cars, like running.
Mm.
So like that that's just like my only experience of family life
Oh,
at
yeah.
that point. And there was like a lot of moving, and I just kept on not not talking about it because my grandparents, like, who wants to talk about stuff like that? You know what I
Exactly.
mean? And they were like really awesome people to us, but also like didn't know that things like that could like sort of affect the rest of your life in certain ways, I think. And they were paying for me to go to a private Christian school whenever I was at their house. And I went to an Anglican church with them too, like every
Mhm.
Sunday. So that's going on at the same time. And I sung in a choir. And like I really liked singing in the choir at my
Yeah.
church, and there were so many. Like my favorite thing about the church that I grew up in is just the people. Like there were just so
Mhm.
many characters and people who were supportive and just
Mhm.
funny people, like just being
Mhm.
human and stuff. And everybody was trying their best to follow Jesus, but it was like, as I remember, it was very different version of what that means than meeting, but I never remember like being treated badly or anything at my church or at
Mhm.
my school. But I remember feeling like I was not comfortable with the priests wearing like big robes. Like that was just a personal thing. It had nothing to do with like how my family felt. It was just in me, like
Yeah.
to feel like unauthentic about certain things. I had to
Mhm.
wear like a uniform going down the aisle, like in the choir, and I didn't like that.
Yeah.
So as I got older, I started to have panic attacks, like about
Mm.
that. And I don't know, I had anxiety anyway. So, like, I don't know how much of it was just based on me feeling like this is not an authentic environment for me, or whether it was like just me having anxiety anyways at people
Mm-hmm.
looking at me. And I
Mm-hmm.
had to sing solos and stuff, and I felt bad about that. Like, I felt
Right.
like I just in myself felt like it's more of a private, intimate thing. Like, worshiping God is
Mm-hmm.
not um like about pretty songs, and like if that's nice
Mm-hmm.
too, but for me it was just like the meat of the issue is like something that goes on quietly, like behind the scenes. And I
Yeah.
felt like there was sort of a lack of that, and like a lot of the prayers were things that people had written ahead of time,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought that was nice, but it just wasn't my style, you know. But
Yeah.
I still like respected everyone. I never felt like, oh, these people are doomed, you know. Like,
Right.
I just felt like this is just not like feeling quite with me right now. But I was also starting to, be a teenager, and lots of things don't feel quite right. So then
Mm-hmm.
my mom fell in love with someone at our church, like the church, the Anglican church that we went to.
Mm-hmm.
And like this is when I was 11 was when they first like started dating.
Mm-hmm.
And because of my previous experiences, I was really hard on this guy, like really, really
Oh.
hard. I was becoming a teenager, and I was really like right away, I was like disgusted by him. Like, what's the best way to
Mm-hmm.
describe it? It's not his fault. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he could have been anyone, and I would have been like, back off, that's my mom, like
Mm-hmm.
because I had, and it wasn't because I was trying to be selfish, it's because like I really felt like I had to protect her. Like, that was my
Mm-hmm.
internal feeling. So we got off on a really bad start. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that affected like him, like how he approached me, and like what he felt like he could be as a father to me once they got married and stuff like that. Like I would say like 50% of it was just like misunderstanding. But yeah, he did not love me, and I tried my best to love him and understand him. But yeah, there was no warmth ever
Mm-hmm.
at all between us.
Mm-hmm.
So like that's very toxic for my mom too. And
Right.
to have to exist between these two people that she loves. And like, I mean, when I think about it, I feel like I tried a lot, and maybe he would too. Um, but like he was the adult, and he did know about the things that had happened. So I feel like, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I can blame myself, but I feel like as an adult now, if I knew, I would have been like bending over backwards for this kid, you know what I mean? But that's just
Yeah.
my approach to things, because I would have been like, okay, well, obviously you're not going to trust me at first, like
Mm-hmm.
but anyways, it didn't our relationship didn't go well, but like I was obedient, and but I never felt at home, and in the home that we lived in.
Mm-hmm.
And so like right away, I was trying to live at other people's houses. Like, I would find friends with secure situations, and I would try my best, like I would extend sleepovers for many days. And because I was a well-behaved kid, the parents would, agree to it. So that
Mm-hmm.
started when I was really young. And I had some really good relationships from the Christian school. It was really like tightly knit. So I basically lived every weekend at like this, it was a priest and his family's house. And I didn't go to their like denomination of church. They actually went to all sorts of different churches. And so I got to go to a lot of different churches when I was young. They took
Mm-hmm.
me to New York City. Like, I got to be part of their family. Like, they had a different name for me. It was JJ. Like, I
Wow.
felt like they were my family too. They had 4 kids,
Wow.
and they really got me to like, I was able to experience, I guess, the warmth of a real family when I was with them, even though I also felt that with my mom when I was able to be alone with her,
Mm-hmm.
but just not in my home. So
Mhm.
it was a really strange upbringing, I guess. And I
Mhm.
also felt warmth, obviously, at my grandparents' house. So that was like my background of my childhood. Then so when I was 18, I knew I needed to get out of this house with my
Mhm.
stepdad and my mom. And I had two stepbrothers and stepsisters too. So they were actually it's a really sad story. Their mom was not well too. So by the end of it, my stepsister, her boyfriend was in and out of jail. She was stealing things from my room. Like it was actually like it
Mhm.
wasn't just I'm uncomfortable because like I don't
Mhm.
feel loved. It was like people were stealing things from me, like all
Mhm.
my possessions when I stayed in that house. Like it
Mhm.
got really out of hand and my mom was deciding, okay, we have to she decided that she had to divorce him, but it was sort of like the middle of that stage where they were like figuring out how to separate or if they really would separate. So I was like, I
Mhm.
have to get out of here. Like I just like so I ran away to Montreal, which is like a big city in Canada, and everybody
Mhm.
speaks French, and I'm terrible at French.
Mhm.
So I was like, um, I was actually not very good at school in general. Like I was not
Yeah.
participant in school a lot growing up. So anyways, so I basically was as close to homeless as you can be with, but I did have an apartment in a slums that I shared with other people. There was cockroaches, like I slept in a dirty pile of laundry. Like I just,
Wow.
like it was bad. Like, and I was eating because the only food I was eating was because I worked at a diner.
Mm.
And that was the only reason why I really pulled myself together was to go to work because I knew I needed to pay the rent and everything like that. So
Yeah.
um, I worked at this diner called Nuit Jour, and it was like the most amazing experience. There was this man there at Nuit Jour, and he was basically my boss and the cook at the same time. I worked the night shift. So
Mhm.
there wasn't a lot of customers and I was like at first terrible at my job, and this
Mhm.
person with no ulterior motives was so kind to me, like, and a
Yeah.
real father figure. So he like taught me how to do everything I had to do, everything, and very patient, never made me feel stupid, like very
Mhm.
and I feel like he must have seen the signs that my life outside of work was not awesome. Like,
Mhm.
there's no way no one, like, to me, I thought I wasn't making it obvious, but you know what I mean? So it's like, I just
Absolutely.
felt like he was really putting himself on the line to be so kind. So, anyways, this is important. It might not seem like it is,
Mhm.
but so there was a lot of escorts working out of this place because it was open all night. And so there
Mhm.
was a lot of like illegal activity happening. And
Mhm.
I was only 18 years old, and they were trying to like all of
Mhm.
the guys that were, I forget the name
Mhm.
for them, but anyways, were trying to get me to become an escort. And
Mhm.
so this guy literally like put his life on the line and said like she's with me. She's
Mhm.
there, like don't
Mhm.
don't approach her anymore. And they
Mhm.
never did. And like
Wow.
he like had that authority, I think because they were illegally working through that. But anyways, he protected me like in a
Mhm.
really vulnerable situation. Like not that I was ever tempted, but I feel like because my life was such a mess at that time, I
Mhm.
wouldn't put it past like getting lured into a weird situation, at least,
Right.
you know what I mean? Again,
Mhm.
so, anyways, and then he would always say at the end of every shift, like, you're too good for us, Julia. Get out of here. And
Oh.
so he was so sweet. And
Yeah.
no one had ever said like anything like that.
Mhm.
So I just felt like that's so important, like
Mm.
people, you know what I mean? Like to me, um, that was like the Holy Spirit. Like, you know what I mean? Like someone who loves you first and like sees potential in you. And
Mhm.
so like I got out of that situation and I really owe it to that man.
Yeah.
But we didn't stay in touch. And like I said, he had no ulterior motive, so he wasn't at all creepy.
Yeah.
Like there was no like you have to stay in contact, like it was just
Hmm.
being a nice person. I feel like, yeah, he was just a really special person. But that was just in him to be nice, like he cared.
Hmm.
And I even went back to visit, and he was working that day for some reason. And he's again said, like, when I came in, like when I was older, it was like a year later, he's like, Julia, what are you doing here? You're too good for us.
Hmm.
Like that was the
Hmm.
first thing he said to me. And I was just like crying my eyes. I was like, you're so awesome. Like, I would not have been able to live if it wasn't for you. Like, you got me
Hmm.
out of that situation. So that was like, and then I moved to actually California for a while after that, because I had friends there. I tried living a lot of places, running away from myself, and then I
Hmm.
burnt out. Like I just completely burnt out. I had to come back to Ottawa because I didn't have like the life skills. I worked at a furniture store in Pasadena in LA,
Hmm.
and I could do my job, but I didn't have like the life skills to like I could be really good at my jobs, but then have no life. Like because it
Hmm.
would take everything. Like I just didn't I
Hmm.
had no balance. Like I could pretend to be someone, but I couldn't be me. Like I didn't know how. So I could be like really good
Hmm.
at something for a while, but then I would burn out, and I didn't have
Right.
a lot of life skills. So I was like, I have to go to school or something. Like I have to, and I have to have like a place where I can rest and feel safe, like for an
Right.
extended period of time. So my mom happily let me, like, she just had a little apartment at the time. Like, that was another thing. We never could afford a car growing up. Like, I never learned to drive. Like, there was a lot of things that I just
Hmm.
never experienced. And I didn't
Hmm.
even know that for a long time, I didn't even know that that was part of other people's regular lives. Like,
Right.
so, so she took me back, and which is really, I mean, letting a 20-year-old come back after like going on crazy adventures is very
Hmm.
loving, and like just
Hmm.
supporting me, and my grandparents helped me get into school. I just took baking for 1 year, and then I was able to cook and bake and like
Hmm.
get a job, and then I got my own apartment. But they
Hmm.
were always like helping me through all of this time, my mom
Yeah.
and my grandparents. And my mom was getting therapy, like lots of therapy.
Okay. Yeah.
And she was just like blossoming, like, and
Yeah.
really I could see the difference. She was able to just take care, like she's such a caregiver, which
Hmm.
is what made her so vulnerable to people. But
Hmm.
like she took care of my grandparents while they were both dying. She takes care of everybody. Like she takes care of me. Like she lives
Hmm.
far away from me, but you
Hmm.
can just see in her life like hope, So I knew that seeing, like, I was like, there's no way that this is so simple as like, as far going back to our church, like, there's no
Yeah.
way. I see evidence in her life, like, of a really hard situation and growing because
Yeah.
of wanting and believing in God and seeking
Hmm.
help. And you know what I mean? So it's
Hmm.
beautiful. And so that was going on. And then I was able to, like, I got a lot of free counseling
Hmm.
um, because I was low income. And in Ottawa, there's a lot, like, if you actually look for it and want to do it.
Hmm.
But I never thought like that the fact that I had been like sexually abused was important. So I never told any of my
Hmm.
counselors about that. Um, I don't think any of my counseling ever know. They were only able to help me so much because I was
Yeah.
not telling them this situation.
Hmm.
So I learned a lot of cognitive therapy strategies and stuff, and that was really helpful. And so I went into school for animation. I ended up like not and illustration for 1 year, and like just
Hmm.
learning how to draw and paint better because I've always loved doing that.
Hmm.
And then I decided like that wasn't my career path, and I got a diploma in developmental service work. So I
Hmm.
worked with disabled people, in palliative care,
Oh.
people like they were my people, like
Hmm.
people that
Hmm.
just couldn't fully function in society. Like I
Yeah.
was trying to teach them strategies of like how can we do the same things as everybody else. That's basically what
Mm.
developmental is like. How can you help someone become more independent? So I was basically doing that for myself at the same time
Yeah.
because I had like this disability, this invisible disability that people expected me to be good at things, and I just felt like I was sort of faking it like all the time,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
I was living outside of my own body a lot of the time, like I was disassociating when I got too stressed out. I was so like I learned as much as like from that experience, and I took psychology, so I learned about every single um, you know, mental
Mhm.
illness and things I had been diagnosed with when I was younger. And so that was really healing, like to
Mhm.
be able to look at that stuff in textbooks myself, like and like think about all this and think about how it affects other people. And the way that I did that work was like always that these people are my equals. Like when you do work like that way, like you're actually treating people like you would yourself, it's like twice as much work, like in a shift.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it really was exhausting for me. And I also felt upset when other people weren't doing things to the standards I thought like were right.
Mhm.
There was a lot more happening for me in that job than other people. Like
Yeah.
I was analyzing everybody's situation. And then I worked for the city of Ottawa also, programs like going taking people to museums, so that they
Mhm.
could do the things everyone else does like during the summer. And I
Mhm.
worked with homeless people, like doing programs with homeless people.
Yeah.
So I got to meet beautiful people, like
Yeah.
that were very wounded by life, but beautiful anyways, right? So
Right.
I already had that secure, like inside of me, like
Mhm.
just like I already knew about fellowship with God
Mhm.
because of those
Mhm.
experiences. Like I just didn't recognize, like I didn't know like Jesus or anything. I didn't
Yeah.
like, even though I had been brought up in a church, I didn't think I needed like I didn't conceive that I needed a
Mhm.
savior, but I
Mhm.
did confess a lot, like internally, when I felt like my conscience was going really a
Mhm.
wrong way. So, like, I
Mhm.
just felt like, okay, this is like it feels wrong. So I would say
Mhm.
sorry to God, and like I had different things that happened to me over this time, like a near death experience and stuff,
Wow.
where like I made I prayed to God and I made a deal. Like basically, like
Mhm.
I saw my own like the reasons why I was in this vulnerable situation, and I said like I want to not do that anymore, and I know you can help me. So like I was aware of all this, and at the same time, like not typical like yeah, like I'd not have my like a saved moment, or
Mm.
but this was
Mhm.
going on, and I felt like God spoke to me all the time, like in my life, like for sure.
Right.
So I was I basically didn't want to go to any church. Like that was my plan. I was like, I'm done with
Yeah.
churches, never again. Like
Yeah.
that was totally what I was. So my religious experiences were like I got really into Rumi's poetry at one point. That was what made me comfortable with
Mhm.
using the word God, using the word Jesus again. Like
Mm.
I think it was something that happened with my stepdad, like with the
Yeah.
dynamics in our house. And he did use
Mhm.
the Bible to tell me how vain I was, and things like
Wow.
that happened in our house. So
Mhm.
like, I don't know the details because it's hard,
Mhm.
but yeah. So I
Mhm.
became comfortable again with the idea of God and like talking about God to another
Mhm.
person for the first
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe meeting people don't know about this because they get to talk about God with other people all the time. But I got huge backlash from my friends. Like, there's a lot of people who are very
Mhm.
upset with God. Like, so if
Mhm.
you talk about it in a certain way, people will tell you to leave them alone. Like, and that's what
Mhm.
happened to me. Because like I really did believe that God, like I would not be alive without God, that God was helping me, and
Mhm.
that it was like, so me talking about that to someone who has like is really upset about a hurt in their life, and they're blame
Mhm.
like for some reason at that time, I'm not saying forever, but that they're blaming,
Mhm.
that can be really annoying to have someone, because they
Yeah.
think that I'm just like trying to preach to them or whatever. So that
Right.
happened with some of my friends. So I learned like to be careful, although in myself I had become comfortable with like,
Mhm.
if it's the right situation, I can talk about God. Like,
Yeah.
you know, in my experiences with God. But I was like, okay, but you have to be careful because some
Mhm.
people are gonna get really angry. So that, and then so I also was really interested in Aboriginal beliefs because my grandmother felt really bad about what the church had done to Aboriginal
Mhm.
people, and she was like big in the Aboriginal and Native community
Mhm.
in Canada. So she, like, what I mean is she was very much a part of like drumming circles,
Mhm.
um, and healing circles and stuff like that. And she like committed a lot of her life to like a women's shelter for people who had been abused within Native,
Mhm.
you know. So she was really knew a lot about that
Mhm.
community. So I trusted it. And then also I had always thought that I was like part Native because my father's mother was Native American,
Mhm.
Wabanaki tribe.
Mhm.
So like I had this connection inside of me that I was like, okay, like maybe these people are my people, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
and I really liked a lot of their spirituality. Like it really spoke to me. So I went to the Native Healing Center, and I learned lots of beautiful things. I did like sweat lodges and smudging and everything like that. But anyways, I thought it was valuable. Like it was all
Mhm.
valuable. But then I got like singled out by this guy who
Mhm.
was like, I guess a like he was like a leader sort of in, you know, not to everybody, but he was like a medicine man. And so
Okay.
he, but or maybe he wasn't, I don't know, but anyways he told
Mhm.
me he was, and he might not have been, but he like convinced me that like I needed extracurricular
Mm.
stuff. So anyways, so he like ended up sexually assaulting me. So, anyways, like on the first encounter that we had outside of like the regular healing center,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
that was devastating to me. And it really, like, even though I still appreciated everything I learned, I felt like I couldn't go back there anymore. So
Yeah.
that sort of ended that part of my life like
Mhm.
abruptly, but it was not the fault of the like the people or anything.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
anyway, so that sort of ended. So I was searching like spiritually, just in a totally different way. That's what I'm trying to get at. Like I was
Mhm.
definitely looking for like, okay, so where can I talk about God? And
Yeah.
so yeah, so then and then I was supporting a friend who had addictions too. So at this time, all at this time. So I went to his like AA meetings with him sometimes. I
Mhm.
didn't drink at all, like to help him because
Mhm.
like I knew I was fine, but like I just didn't want anyone around him to make him drink again, right? And then
Mhm.
we had been friends for like 10 years or something. So but just different friendships, like and it had been like a boyfriend at one point, like sort of
Mhm.
not sure what's going on. But anyways, so like I went to Narnon, so I learned all about codependency through Narnon because of,
Sure.
so that was like a huge eye-opening experience for me too. So like it's like I learned everything that should have, I mean, protected me from a lot of stuff, but it's
Yeah.
still, you know, in this different situation. I mean, it took a long time to figure out what was going on.
Right.
So, and then also, I got into Buddhism for a long
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
And like I have a children who's like out of Newfoundland in Canada, has like a she's like the head monk in like Gampo Abbey, which is like
Okay.
the, so my friend went there and like
Mm.
was one of the they call them the monks, like one of the Buddhist monks. Her writing is beautiful, Pema Chödrön. She used to be a Catholic and became a Buddhist. And so I loved her teachings. So we were just friends when he went to this place, Campo Abbey. And so I heard about all the background information of that experience. Because he wrote to me and then when he got back told me a lot too. So he was a cook there, and in Buddhism, they like all the teachings are really beautiful. Like they teach about selflessness and getting rid of the ego, very similar to the core, like what I would call core Christian beliefs
Mm-hmm.
and sentiments
Mm-hmm.
and like what Jesus taught, like very,
Mm-hmm.
it's very, like it's hard to tell how in some places how they're different at all. So he was feeding like all the monks and the special monks, like the ones
Mm-hmm.
that taught, had been around for a long time, taught really long sessions or whatever. I don't know. Like I did meditation and it was really helpful to me, but I never got deep into Buddhism like him. So I'm probably messing up like the terminology, but
Mm-hmm.
so he had to make these really ornate special meals for these
Mm-hmm.
special. And I was like, well, doesn't that go against like
Yeah.
everything that I learned in Buddhism? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's like that everywhere because it sounded like there were things that were opposite to what
Right.
the real meat of the teachings was. So it was
Right.
not like what I was looking for. You know what I mean? So,
Mm-hmm.
so I had all these experiences leading up to, um, like when I moved from Ottawa to Sarnia, it was very simple reason I couldn't afford to buy a house in Ottawa and
Mm-hmm.
Sarnia had affordable housing and it was in
Mm-hmm.
Ontario. But
Yep.
in the background, I was dating a guy who was from here, and
Mm-hmm.
my current husband Johnny was
Mm-hmm.
not that person. He
Mm-hmm.
so he was friends with that person. But I heard a lot about Johnny like through the person I
Mm-hmm.
was dating and his friend. And both of those people went to meeting. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't know. I didn't know. They never told me. I didn't know. So my husband and his good friend that he lived with, who were just my friends for like
Mm-hmm.
many, many, many years. Like even before I moved to Sarnia, we would talk on the phone. I could talk about God with them. So
Mm-hmm.
so like I could freely talk about God and they did not judge me at all. But they also were not brought up in meeting. So and they were the least meeting people that
Mm-hmm.
you could ever really like um like they still like they had music concerts
Mm-hmm.
regularly with like like involving the whole city basically. They my husband when I met him, we were just friends. I came into his house like with my other friends and
Mm-hmm.
his bedroom, like when he showed us his bedroom, it was a bed between two pianos so he could play
Mm-hmm.
both pianos at once while
Oh
he was lying
wow.
down. Yeah.
Wow.
So like these people were not typical like
Mm-hmm.
and they had real experiences with God, which I won't,
Mm-hmm.
like they
Mm-hmm.
were very so my impression was that these people like even though the meeting people looked really um, prim and proper, I still knew they had accepted my friends, and that opened up a lot of trust. And they had been treated really well, like by the
Okay.
people
Yeah.
here, like had really
Yeah.
positive experiences. So like I had that, you know what I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and that impression. And I really think they were the reason why in a way I started going, but what really happened was I just started wanting to read my Bible, except I didn't have one. I didn't
Okay.
even own a Bible.
Yeah.
So I started reading someone else's Bible that I borrowed. And so,
Mm-hmm.
but I borrowed it for a long time. I
Mm-hmm.
read it every morning just on my own, like nothing
Yeah.
that the boys had said, right? Like I
Mhm.
didn't even know. I knew they went to a place like that had a farm in the
Mhm.
summer. They had never even mentioned convention. Like they were
Mhm.
very not trying to get people. Like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like they were
Yep.
just like letting people be people and no, yeah, there was no
Mhm.
pressure at all. So it was because I asked them
Mhm.
that like they finally took me. That I was like being really nosy, you know, like,
Yeah.
and when I think of them, it's like if you met Samson and John the Baptist living in a cave together. Like just
Hmm.
the most wild characters from eating
Yeah.
their honey and locusts and just doing their own like their concept of what Christianity and meeting, it was entirely different
Mhm.
than anything that I've heard. So at that, I mean, that had a huge effect on my comfort level. They
Mhm.
spoke in my dialect, you know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
about like it's like you're looking your whole life for someone that speaks your language and then you find people and they speak your
Wow.
language,
Yeah.
so it's a really beautiful experience. So anyways, so they brought me to my first meeting, and like I remember feeling like kind of weird about it, like
Mhm.
because I didn't like churches. And
Mhm.
but I actually like a lot of things that people don't like about meeting, I like.
Mhm.
Like I
Mhm.
liked how quiet it was. I liked that it was like more serious, and
Mhm.
like there was no like praise music or like, do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like that it was
Yep.
just not that I have an issue with any of those things, but those
Yep.
things really felt comfortable to me and
Mhm.
felt like I could focus to me, like
Yeah.
just from
Yep.
how I feel.
Mhm.
Yeah, like I just kept going and I felt like it was more curiosity at first, really, like because I didn't understand how these men that I knew who were very loyal, trustworthy
Mhm.
people, but also very strange, would end up in this environment. Like it just to
Mhm.
me, like the whole thing was like just this mystery. My first special meeting, like that was the first time that I sort of heard some exclusive stuff.
Mhm.
Like before that, that's another thing. So I feel like people really when you're from the outside, people like both the workers and people in the home meeting sort of
Mhm.
are careful.
Yeah.
They're very careful about the exclusive stuff. They
Mhm.
only do that later. Like they only talk
Mhm.
about that later, like when they feel like, oh, well, maybe it's okay to start talking about that now. No
Okay.
one talked about that at all for where
Mhm.
we were. For the longest time, I had no idea. But my first special meeting, and this all happened a lot faster than it does for most people for me. Like it was like months, like a
Mhm.
full year, my whole life had changed. So anyways,
Right.
fun. But yeah, so so at the special meeting I heard some testimony, like I heard lots of beautiful things. Like for me, I felt like it's beautiful.
Mhm.
People are talking about God and Jesus, and like I just felt like what like lots of it was sound like I felt really humbled because I'm really judgmental towards religious people like
Mm.
by nature.
Mhm.
So I was
Mhm.
like, wow, these people are for real. Like, in a
Yeah.
lot of ways, like they sounded broken. And like I was like,
Mhm.
and I could relate to that sound. Like that sound was
Mhm.
something that I knew, and I was like,
Mhm.
and I felt like these people are really like for real. And and then but I did hear some of the exclusive stuff. So then afterwards, after the meeting, I was like, I had a lot of feelings about it. So I was afraid to tell him that like about things that I didn't like because I knew it was really important to him.
Mhm.
So I told his friend, who I was also really good friends with, I said like God's family is not an exclusive club of people. Like I said that
Mhm.
after my first
Mhm.
time. It's not just a human group where you're like you get together and you're like, whoa, we're God's family now. Like it's like I
Mhm.
agree with all the things I'm hearing, but that part's not right. Like
Mhm.
who the people like they don't know God yet then,
Mhm.
like basically I had that conversation. When
Mhm.
I got to know how my husband felt more intimately, he had always had trouble with that too. So it's like,
Mhm.
but I didn't know like where anybody stood at first, and I didn't want to
Yeah.
insult anyone. So anyway, so after that whole thing, one thing that like going to meetings did do is like I had never feared God at all in my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this was the first time I felt I was like, oh, there's stuff I have to do too. Like I
Mhm.
literally in my church that was yeah, like that fellowship was just treating people as you
Mhm.
would want to be treated. Like that's
Mhm.
it. And
Mhm.
I feel like that's true. Like I wasn't wrong to feel that way.
Mhm.
And that in that experience is where you get intimacy with God and
Mhm.
where like faith branches out into the more, but it's like from a very loving place. Like and
Mhm.
but then meetings started to make me like there was a lot of things that seemed to be important to different people,
Mhm.
and so, like, I just all of a sudden felt like more was required of me. Like, I didn't fully understand, but I did feel nervous. And, like, so I just, like, felt really, really sad that I wasn't getting it. Like, I felt like maybe I'm not getting this, like, because, and so I realized also that there was, like, weight in my life that, like, I couldn't have borne on my own. So, like, I read a lot about Jesus and I felt like I actually need Jesus. So I
Mhm.
prayed, like saying, I believe like that Jesus
Mhm.
is your son and that I need him, like that there's no other way for me, like
Mhm.
so then I had an experience with Jesus, like, and it
Mhm.
was really beautiful and like very intimate. So I'm not gonna talk about that because I feel
Mhm.
like it's different for everyone, and I feel like everything's valid. Like, and sometimes when you hear about other people's experiences, it makes you think like, well, why didn't that happen in my
Mhm.
situation? But it's not true. Like people need different things at different times. And so, and it filled me with love and lightness for sure. Like,
Mhm.
and I felt like I got a fresh start. Like that's
Mhm.
from the experience. And it was also the most intimate thing that's ever happened to me. So that's another reason why I don't feel like I could talk about it.
Yep.
So that happened. And so I told the workers, but I didn't tell
Mhm.
them what happened. I just said, like, I believe in Jesus now. Like,
Mhm.
and it was totally separate from meeting, separate from them. Like, it happened because I was reading my Bible, but it was influenced, I think. Like,
Mhm.
it was intertwined, but in in my recollection and my feelings, they were separate entities. It was like I
Mhm.
had an experience with Jesus. So they said, or I said, like, I think I'm supposed to let other people know, right? Like, is that what's like? I didn't know how it worked at all.
Mhm.
So they were like, yeah, you can let other people know. Like, and that was the agreement. It was like me, like the reason why and I didn't know if I had to tell a speech. Like, I literally didn't know how it works. I never seen anyone profess. I didn't know, and no one really told me.
Mhm.
So I was just like, I don't really want to make a speech, but
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
I didn't know how it worked. Like,
Wow. Yeah.
so, but then I ended up they brought them, I didn't have a car, I could only walk. So they brought the meetings really close to me. So there was no
Mhm.
way I could not go.
Yeah.
And like they got a community center like a block away from my house,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and and the friends had started visiting me like in my workplace. Like
Mhm.
everybody was like was perusing, and like I
Mhm.
didn't feel weird about that. I was just like,
Mhm.
they're just nice people who want to get to
Mhm.
know me. I can see how maybe some people, but I don't think any of it was ill intent. It was just
Mhm.
curiosity on both sides.
Mhm.
So yeah, I stood up in meeting, and like for me it was saying that I had a real experience with Jesus, and I wanted to show other people that that he was the one speaking to me all along, like
Mhm. Mhm.
Whenever I had those fellowship experiences, it was him. So
Mhm.
that was like my agreement in my mind, but it quickly felt like it was more about what we were doing and what the workers did, like
Mm.
to me. And it was from the very beginning, there was conflict, for me
Mm.
about that. But like I also heard a lot of really good things, and this was the only church I had ever been comfortable in. So I really felt like there was nowhere else to go. Like,
Mm.
so I really had, like, when people, I don't know whether they say that in meeting, they probably do.
Mm.
But I actually felt that way. So um, but it was not because I was entirely in agreement with
Mhm.
everything that everyone said. It
Mhm.
was because it was the closest
Mhm.
that I had ever gotten to being in
Mhm.
agreement. So you know what I mean? So that
Mhm.
was going on from the very beginning. And so then I read in the Bible, like First Corinthians 8, like where it says, but be careful of your freedom may cause those who are weak in faith to fall into sin. Like I read that and I was like, oh, so I have to actually do what these people do too because they're so weak in faith. Like I literally I had nose piercings, not when I professed, but it was like sort of while this was all happening.
Mm.
Um, I think I'd already taken out my nose piercings, but I was still like wearing jewelry sometimes, like that was
Mhm.
just I had a jewelry store. Like I mean like I had my own jewelry business that I made
Mhm.
jewelry. And
Mhm.
so it's like I don't know, like it's hard to know all of the factors,
Yep.
but I was sort of like feeling like, okay, well, if salvation is all that matters, and I like was reading Acts and like people were willing to like sell their houses, like all this stuff, I was like, well, who am I to like hold back anything? You know what I mean? Like it
Mhm.
sort of um made sense to me at the time. I was just like, and I felt like, well, what's the harm in trying? You know what I mean? This is something you've never tried before.
Yeah.
I was like, so I literally followed every rule. Like a lady in our area said, like that we don't wear pants. So I gave away all my pants.
Mhm.
Uh, like everything that they like, if someone had an issue, I dealt with it. Like I gave away all of my business that I'd worked hard for, to
Mm.
all of the stuff to other people in the community, to people that I worked like at the health food store with.
Mhm.
This was a side business, but it was like,
Mhm.
an Etsy store type situation.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, it was hard too. Oh, and it just never ended. I Every time I would go to meeting, it felt like I would be like, well, maybe I'm still allowed to make music, or maybe I'm still, but if you go
Yeah.
to meeting thinking, well, like, is that okay? Like, I was really having trouble figuring out what is the definition of flesh to these people. Because to
Right.
me, the definition of flesh was jealousy, was
Mhm.
like cheating on your spouse or with anyone, like being dishonest, wanting to hurt people, like that was, I mean, the list goes on, but there's a list of them, and that was the flesh. And it's like, but they were saying like all this other stuff leads to those things, so it's like there's like, and
Mhm.
that's what I was hearing in the home meeting, that's what I was hearing from, like, well, the other family in our area was also not brought up in meeting, but
Mhm.
they had like a really strict outlook, like
Okay.
the
Yeah.
other family. So then, so that had a huge influence. So I was getting rid of everything. So I have books here that I rebought that I gave away to show like the type of things I was giving away.
Yeah.
So this is like a
Uh-huh.
book about watercoloring
Okay. Sure.
nature. So
Yeah.
I thought that might I was being convinced that everything that could remind me of my past life, or like could be
Mhm.
distracting. If there was anything distracting, that
Wow.
that might be dangerous. That's what I was hearing being preached. I wasn't
Mhm.
seeing that kind of fervency happening. Like, but I didn't
Mhm.
know the friends that well. But what I did, like the people that I did know who were very strict did
Mhm.
go through similar transitions, like not my
Mhm.
husband, but so I knew it was individual. I knew it was like my own
Mhm.
choice. And, but for me, because I felt like meeting made me feel like I have no discernment on my own.
Okay, yeah.
Like, they basically said, like, you don't know how to be close to God except by us. Like, you know what I mean? That's how I felt. And I was like, well, maybe they're right. Maybe I do have like an evil heart. Like like, the heart of man is evil. And like my life is messy. Like if you really look at it, and it's like maybe these people are right. Like, and
Mhm.
so and meeting is very vague. So like
Mhm.
anything that you come in thinking, should I give it up? You will hear like 10 times deny the flesh and
Mhm.
whatever that means to the individual, right? Like, and it's very, I had no idea that we were not unified in the
Yeah.
meeting. We are not at all unified in the meaning of that. But at the beginning, I was just, so yeah, I just tried everything. I felt like I already had a relationship with God, but didn't want to lose it.
Mhm.
So I visited my grandmother for the last time, like right after I professed, and she was worried about me. Like my mom and my grandmother were worried
Mhm.
about me, and
Mhm.
some of my friends in Ottawa were worried about me too because like quit social media, like there was
Mhm.
no contact anymore.
Mhm.
And I think they thought like maybe she's gone crazy or,
Mhm.
um, but my grandmother just said to me, I'm glad that you're at least reading your Bible. Like,
Mhm.
things will end up okay. Like it just,
Mhm.
she didn't want to make me feel like bad, I think. But my mom, I remember saying like, you're not evil. Like I just remember her saying that to me, like, and I was like, well, everybody's evil without God. And I remember us getting in like sort of an argument because I think she really felt like she couldn't talk to me anymore the same way. Like
Mhm.
um, and she felt like there was something coming between us, like at that
Mhm.
time. So, but I don't want to read too much into it, but like that happened, like, and I felt like a more of a distance. Like I didn't want to give her a bad impression of meeting. So if I was feeling like not sure about something, I didn't want to talk to my own mom about it because I was like,
Mhm.
well, maybe she'll come to meeting, and that's supposed to be the place that
Mhm.
people go, like, so it was like a lot of things sort of mixed up together feeling, and
Mhm.
I still was trying to figure things out. And then so my first convention, I went, like my husband wasn't there either.
Mhm.
Like we were not married yet. Like we were still just friends, and he couldn't go to that convention because he had to work. And so
Mhm.
this other family, like in our area, brought me, and it was beautiful to me. Like I was just like, I had never seen anything like that before. Like,
Mhm.
and just
Mhm.
the way that everybody worked together. I only saw like the outside
Mhm.
part, so the outside parts, if they were true inside, I felt like this is beautiful. Like,
Yeah,
and the
exactly.
only thing that was weird, like there was a couple things. I sat down where the workers are supposed to
Oh,
sit by
really?
accident,
Yeah.
and I was told, and I was like, well, that's weird. Like there's a spot for
Mhm.
them. Like I
Mhm.
definitely noted that right away, and I was like, that's sort of like the things that I've had issue with other churches. Like these things kept on coming up. I was like, I judged other places really harshly, but I was afraid for some reason to judge, like
Yeah.
because of my own psychology, the dynamics of the situation. I
Mhm.
wasn't, I felt bad. I felt like a bad person for saying, wait a second, like that doesn't seem quite right to me. Like I felt like I
Mhm.
wasn't allowed to do that with meeting for
Yeah.
some reason. And I think it is a lot of the things that they say over and over again, but
Yeah.
it's still hard for me to break it all down. Like it honestly is
Yeah.
hard for me. And it does make me feel like a little bit brainwashed, to be
Yeah.
honest. But anyway, um, so I got baptized my first convention. All I did was say, like, they had seen what had happened to me.
Mhm.
They saw, like, I took out my piercings, like, they saw I
Mhm.
covered my tattoos as best I
Mhm.
could, So they
Mhm.
had they saw that like I was trying my best to like in I'm saying meeting eyes, like for people who thought that way, they saw that I was doing my best, like to be
Mhm.
like them, right?
Mhm.
On my end, it was really just trying to love other Christians.
Mhm.
I really do think a lot of it was out of love, and that's why it didn't hurt too badly to
Yeah.
and I was trying my best to try something I'd never tried before and find a
Yeah.
way to be more spiritual, more free from myself. And I felt like a lot of the things that I was being asked to give up weren't that important anyways. Like, so it was like, it was good to learn about, okay, why are these things so important to me? Like how I look. And
Mhm.
so I felt like experimental about it. And like,
Sure.
so we just were coming from different, but they let me, they felt like I was ready to be baptized. And I felt like I was ready, but I feel like, again, we were both feeling like that in different ways, like on different
Yeah.
terms. Um, but I did like speak at the convention too, and I think I like talked about dying to self, and I felt like I was told that I think by someone, I think it was like the other family that in our area that um that getting baptized is like a funeral or somewhere I heard that it's like a funeral to yourself.
Okay.
So I knew that I didn't know if that was like entirely right.
Mhm.
But I knew that that was what was expected. Like that you had to already be ready for a funeral of yourself, like
Yeah.
no more me, bye bye, everything. Now
Mhm.
it's just so for me, I was thinking like I felt like I had already been baptized. Like
Yeah.
I felt like it was just me doing it to be part of this church.
Yeah.
And that like my experience with Jesus was way more valuable than someone taking me into a lake, like who I
Mhm.
don't even know, like really. So anyway, that was my experience with baptism. But and so my we had workers stay with us. So my husband and I did get married, and that was
Mhm.
like I wish I could tell details of every single part because it's really funny in retrospect. So I was like trying to please everybody, and my husband wanted us just to elope.
Mhm.
So we were inviting people we decided to get married in our home, but we were inviting people into our home, lots of people who did not want to be in the same room at
Mm.
all. Uh, Me completely not understanding, like, and they were Christian too. All these Christian, different people, but
Mhm.
that didn't want to be in the same room as each other.
Yeah.
We were doing that, and I was oblivious to at that time, except that I felt the tension, and I was like, okay, I
Mhm.
don't. So the only thing that I really liked about my wedding was marrying my husband. I should have
Mhm.
eloped, like 100%. He
Mhm.
had the right, but anyways, it was really stressful, and it was a low key thing, but um yeah, like I started to feel like all of the different things, even though I didn't understand them, like the different vibes from different people or different like feelings, but that were unspoken
Yeah.
about, like, everyone was kind, but it just felt really weird, like really really weird.
Mhm. Mhm.
So but still there was like I didn't understand. I felt like there were people who felt exclusive in meeting, and there were people who didn't,
Mhm.
and that was not an agreed upon belief. It was
Yeah.
like that some people were literally like they would just learn more later. I felt like they needed me as much as I needed them. Like I
Mhm.
felt like eventually they'll be open, more people will come, and
Mhm.
they'll figure it out. Like,
Mhm.
so like I was always thinking in those terms, and like you have to forgive people because I see through the glass dimly too, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you have to forgive people for how they're brought up. And so I was always trying my best to just be like, maybe if I show them, like, that you can
Mhm.
really change, and like these things, then it will help them to like
Mhm.
have love,
Mhm.
outside, of meeting too, and like look at people differently. So
Uh-huh.
and there was really, I think in my meeting, there was like only a few people that were really vocal
Mhm.
about, like regularly about their
Mhm.
exclusive belief. But I sort of just was like, I heard things in my own way a lot of the time. Like I would replace things with, I was just like, I would just use whatever I heard to benefit me and to look at myself. And I just was like, well, can't change other people. Like,
Yeah.
sort of when I thought that things were weird, I was just like, whatever. This is the only worker that I'm going to say his name because he died. So I feel like that it's
Mhm.
different then. But a younger worker, and Glenn Richards came to stay at our house, and
Mhm.
they stayed like for an extended time because people were sick in our area, so they just had to keep staying. And I didn't know, I hadn't been told, and like you just never knew when they were gonna leave. That's how it felt like. And
Mhm.
I was going to work. I think I was like freshly pregnant and very emotional, sad, like really sad. And I was working, and I was making meals and
Mhm.
taking care of a house for these two men, like in my house,
Mhm.
sleeping in my bedroom. And it felt awful, but I felt really bad about feeling awful. Like um, I felt like when I read the Bible, like people came to other people's houses and they didn't feel bad about it. And I didn't like some of the things that Glenn Richards said, like,
Mhm.
and he was the first person who made that I ever heard that the entire gospel meeting, his entire thing that he spoke about was exclusivity. Like I didn't have that exclusivity term, but like it, that time, like not all of his gospel meetings, but there was one, and it was
Mhm.
during the time he was staying at my house, that it was all about how people outside are lost, have a lost eternity. Like that was like
Mhm.
all, it seemed like that was all he was saying. And
Mhm.
my grandmother, um, like was in really ill health. I
Mhm.
forget whether she had died, but just all of a sudden it like really hurt, like, and but I didn't know. So I told my husband about it, and he was like, yeah, like I've heard some workers say that, but like that's I don't know about that stuff. Like I just have my experience with God. I love my mom too. She, like, his mom's not perfect, and
Mhm.
I just felt like we talked about stuff all the time, but just that particular issue even seemed hard to talk about for some reason with him, because I was like, I didn't know if he like sort of believed it or not, like,
Yeah.
and so the way that we got around it was just like I read my Bible a lot, and like when Abraham prayed for Lot, not that I felt like I was Abraham praying for Lot or anything, like I could
Mhm.
easily be Lot and Abraham praying for me or whatever, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? But it was
Mhm.
the dynamics of him begging for, if there's even one person in the city,
Mhm.
and like God's answer. And that's the dynamics that was happening, because I was like, I don't know, like I felt answered, like your grandmother, you and your grandmother are good. You've had fellowship with your grandmother. And
Mhm.
one of the ladies in our group, when she died, wrote a card to me about like my grandma, like even though she had never met her, she just said, I bet you're hurting right now. And I felt like, yeah, not everyone thinks like that worker thinks.
Mhm.
Like I was very comforted by my personal experience praying with God, and my talk with my husband and different people that I chose to reach out to. It was nothing against him specifically, but all I knew is like he has his way of thinking, but that doesn't mean that everybody's like. So that was like my outlook at that time. Then I gave birth to our son, and it was an emergency C-section, and I was almost died. And I was like, I felt really close to God, and I felt at peace with his choice because my organs started to fail. Like, and,
Mhm.
but I also was like praying and begging that I would be able to take care of my child. Like, that
Mhm.
was number one, would be first choice, right? To get
Mhm.
better.
Mhm.
And so I was hospitalized for a whole month, and my mom had to move here and do I think she did the day or the night shift, and my husband did the other shift. And they literally, like, I was too weak to even hold my son. So they would hold him next to me all day. And like, I would hold him for a little while, but, and
Mhm.
just like they lived in the hospital with me. And my husband asked like the friends, just I don't know who wanted to visit me, but I know that some people want to visit me, and I said no, like they're not coming.
Mhm.
So I knew at that time that I didn't feel comfortable with certain people in really vulnerable situations, and
Mhm.
that they weren't really like family to me,
Mhm.
like, and even though it was nice that they wanted, I knew that there was something about the dynamics that made me feel unsafe, like, and I was
Mhm.
aware of that too. So I had that going on, but and I think like my husband has his own story, but like he went to meetings for 10 years before I did. So he had been going for a really long time.
Mhm.
So it was still really important to him, and he had a vastly different experience. Like things in our area got really weird when I started coming to meetings. Like there was things that were getting shaken up, and things that happened. And I
Mhm.
mean, I'm not going to tell the details of everything, but yeah. So he never experienced that for 10 years. He had like really nice elderly people caring for him and like inviting him over for lunch every Sunday. And so you know what I mean? So that effect, he had trouble seeing reality when
Mhm.
things started to change a little bit, because
Mhm.
that wasn't his experience for so long. It was a really
Yeah.
positive experience for so long. So anyway, so I just didn't want to make him feel bad, basically. So um, it took a long time to heal after my son's birth, and I could go to meetings just sometimes. And I did feel that was the first time where I felt really let down. Like I started to, like my testimony was, and that was like my son's 8.
Mhm.
So that means at the very beginning, the majority of my time going, I was already like feeling not that awesome sometimes.
Yeah.
So I would give a lot of testimonies about feeling like a Pharisee. Like I actually and I told the workers, like, I'm not sure if this way is making me more religious, like than I was
Mhm.
before. Like I'm not sure that the religion is on the outside. And like
Mhm.
I was pretty open with them about judgmental spirit. I mean, as much as I could be about like how I felt like there's this judgmental spirit that came in. And
Mhm.
and the workers were actually the ones that were not, that was after the Glenn Richards experience, but like other workers that came to our house were very receptive. Like
Mhm.
they seemed almost less closed-minded
Mhm.
than a lot of the older friends. Like they seemed more like, yeah, like they sort of like seemed like they left it open and they weren't opposed to what I was saying, but they wouldn't say anything either. Like
Yeah.
it sort of just felt like they were sponges soaking up and
Mhm.
trying not to offend me. And I think I realized at that point that people are treated like differently, right? Like if
Yeah.
you're from the outside, they don't expect you to right away know everything. They
Mhm.
don't expect it may be depend on the worker, right? But they
Mhm.
don't, and I think that we're really considered valuable. Hate to
Mhm.
say that,
Mhm.
but people from the outside are proof, right? That
Yeah.
like they're rare
Mhm.
and they're proof. So I think like they work harder. I mean, I might be wrong, and I know like lots. I had so many nice workers stay with me that were genuine. Like I'm not saying that. I'm saying like subconsciously, I
Yeah.
think that they're more strict with
Mhm.
generational people,
Yeah.
and you can get away with a whole lot more if you're
Mm.
new. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, and maybe that's good and to be expected, but I started to notice the different people in our meeting were treated differently.
Mhm.
Um, and like not all the same value, and that goes against my core morals, like, you know what I mean? Like I knew that, you know, disabled people, like I said, like the people I worked with, nonverbal people, I knew that like they have to have just as much chance being close to God as me, or that's not fair. Like whether they read the Bible or not, that doesn't make sense. Like
Yep.
so so I had like this going on in the background all the way, and sorry, I know I'm still going on for so long.
Okay.
Hopefully
You're
I won't.
fine.
But um yeah, I felt like no one's allowed to complain like about anything in meeting. Like I felt like people but it's not that just that we're not allowed to complain to other people in meeting. We're not allowed to complain to our friends outside of meeting either, because that'll make meeting look bad. We're not allowed to complain
Mhm.
to our family outside, because that means they might not go. Or so I felt very isolated by it. Like, because I was like, I mean, life isn't perfect and like all these horrible things happen. So it's like, yeah, you have to be able, I guess complain isn't, but commiserate, or like you have to be able to
Mhm.
talk about things that are not positive and not be afraid of terrifying everyone. Like, and that's how it sort of made me feel. And then so there was these dynamics working out with the other family in our area, that the husband who wasn't, they broke up our meeting, so there was two elders, they became elders, that family, and then the older elders became me and my husband's elders. So we
Mhm.
had Wednesday nights from the very beginning of like us getting
Mhm.
married at our house, and we had Union Sunday, but we were never elders or anything like that.
Mhm.
I was totally happy with that. I was like, yeah,
Mhm.
that's enough. Like, I never felt at all insulted by that. And it made sense to me that the other people were like elder material, I
Mhm.
guess. Like,
Mhm.
but then the husband and that family started cheating on the wife.
Okay.
And I was sort of close to the wife. So that started happening in the background. And like I saw how else isolated she was. I was just trying to help her. So like it just taught me a lot about how isolating it is, basically, like for people that are actually going through a thing like that's serious and need, both parties need help. But they just have to keep up appearances instead. They still had to have meeting at their house every Sunday. They had to do all the normal outward act, but then inside there's like this thing hurting both of them, and people need help and they're
Mhm.
not getting help, like, you know,
Mhm.
in various ways. So
Mhm.
so anyways, that was happening, and then COVID happened.
Mhm.
um I sort of skipped my daughter's birth. Okay, so I had my daughter and my father died shortly afterwards, and that changed everything.
Mhm.
Like, what I mean is, I had never spoken about, like, I cried so much when my father died. I had never spoken about what happened
Mhm.
until after he, like, really, except for, like, when I was a teenager, if I got really drunk, I
Okay.
would tell my friends about what happened with my father, and I'd start
Mhm.
crying. That was the only time. Like, I never
Mhm.
told a therapist, I never told anyone.
Mhm.
So like once he died, for some reason, I mean, it makes sense. I felt safe. Like to, it makes, it's not for some reason. It's like, it makes sense. When
Mhm.
the person dies, things happen and you feel
Mhm.
safer to say certain things or let yourself know certain things. So that was going on for me. And I started having flashbacks because my daughter was the same age
Oh
as
wow.
I was when I was abused. So when I was changing her diaper, I would have flashback, like, and
Yeah.
it was hard. So I had to find a way to deal with that. It was like something that
Mhm.
was like on my mind all the time. And
Mhm.
it hadn't, like, I had completely dismissed it for a really
Mhm.
long time. So that was awakening inside of me. And then COVID happened and we couldn't go to meetings. So like I had to read my Bible and have
Mhm.
meeting at home with my husband. And, you know, we were not like, we did not do traditional meeting at home. Like we just read our
Mhm.
own Bibles and we would talk about God when we felt like it.
Mhm.
Like that was it.
Mhm. Mhm.
It was not like a planned thing. It just naturally, organically happened that we
Mhm.
would sometimes talk, and it would be refreshing, and it would not be at a certain time and or wearing certain clothing. So I understood through that God was still speaking to me, not
Right.
going to meetings.
Right.
And meetings was becoming something like darker to me because of the situation, even though those people weren't bad,
Mhm.
but the situation they were going through, right?
Yeah.
So I had all those different dynamics happening. But, and I told I mean, I felt like the workers didn't really value me at that time. Like, I
Mm.
felt like I was starting to say things that uh, like annoyed them, and like that I started to feel disposable sort of like more
Yeah.
at that time too. And I felt like if you really believe that this is the only way, like getting people to these meetings is the only way, then why are you so happy about us all staying home? Like I was actually angry about it at first. Like I was like,
Yeah.
why is everybody like so willing? Like, why can't we just not go if we're sick, like we used to? Or like, why do we have to be? So that was my stance. I'm not saying like that's the right, but and people, felt offended at me feeling that way. Felt like I don't care about old people, or I don't care about,
Mm.
like they were labeling me as something for feeling that way. But it's like, okay, so why would I work in palliative care? Why would I, my whole life? You're dismissing my whole life because of me not agreeing about one thing, So I was very frustrated in a lot of ways, but also having a lot of really wonderful experience with God, finding out more about myself. So that was all happening. And then I'm just gonna look at my notes for a second. My husband needed surgery because he's having health problems. So there's like all this stuff in life happening too that makes you really busy. So you just keep
Yeah.
on going anyways, like, and you don't really put it all together. Like when you have little kids, like I was barely sleeping, um, and so we just kept going afterwards, but things were definitely different for both of us after COVID. So then we got the letter like in Canada about abuse, right?
Mm.
That was I think it was way after Doom Brewer. I don't know because I didn't know anything. Like I knew
Yeah.
zero, zilch, nothing. Like I hadn't heard anything because we had no family, right?
Mhm.
And I was not online at all.
Mhm.
Like even I didn't even have my own. Oh, actually, I just opened a social media because I started doing art during COVID too,
Okay. Sure.
because it was really healing. And I was like,
Yeah.
I started looking at stuff in the Bible for myself and being like, does the Bible actually say you're not allowed to do that? Because that was helpful to me. That was healing to me. And I don't want to give that up anymore. Like, so
Mhm.
I was starting to do that. And if I felt like that at peace with it, and like God didn't ask me that was just me, like putting
Mhm.
that weight on myself, then I was like, I'm going to do that again. Like I bought
Yeah.
certain books back that were healthy. I started doing artwork. So that was happening too during COVID.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I got online because of my business for the first time, like
Mm.
in almost a decade, because I had quit all of my online and not had
Mhm.
any knowledge of that stuff. So that's when we got the letter. And for our letter, I wasn't there when they gave it out, but I heard from other people that our elder basically told people not to talk about it.
Mm.
And the letter basically, to me, when I read it, I remember it making me think there's like one isolated situation in the United States.
Yeah.
It's been dealt with.
Mhm.
We're on the lookout. Like
Mhm.
you're
Mhm.
safe. Like that's the impression I got. So it was like, okay, that's really weird. Like to me, that was devastating that there could be any pedophile
Yep.
in that's going, and that could even be possible. But I was also like, okay, I've seen some isolated situations, and like, I still love these people. They mean a lot to me. Like you develop relationships with everyone, and care for everyone. And our home was like allowed older people to have a home to go to that they would not have. So because the other meeting, that couple ended up moving far away from us. So like we were the only ones left in our area for home for other people to go. So I felt a lot of weight because certain people couldn't even drive at night. They couldn't. So like we were the only way that they could get to meeting. I felt that's how I felt. So I was concerned and I felt like taking a break sometimes, but I was also like, it has to be serious, like to
Yeah.
take a break. And I wasn't sure if it had reached that point yet. So we went to the our last convention. Our car broke down and we couldn't actually get there, and someone had to lend us a car, like to go to
Mhm.
convention. They did all this stuff to get us there, like even
Mhm.
though we probably shouldn't have been able to go. And so I noticed the feelings, like that some people were angry, but I didn't know anything still. So, and I felt like I seemed like when I think of it now, I seem like those people that CCF people get really mad at. Like I
Oh
was just
yeah.
like, like whatever, like
Yeah.
still just trying my best to get along with everyone, had no clue, like, oh, head down in the sand people. But it was because I literally didn't know anything. Um, so that happened. And then I remember the last two speakers at the convention. One spoke about losing your revelation. And I knew when that person said that they were talking about meeting. They
Yeah.
were not talking about losing your revelation of Jesus.
Yeah.
And I felt weird about that because I could
Mhm.
tell that they were, and that was the first time that I started to really notice stuff like that.
Mhm.
And that was before I really knew about all the abuse. And then the other person talked about staying loyal.
Mhm.
And I knew they were talking about, they said to your elder brother, and you could tell they were talking about the workers. They were not talking about staying loyal to Jesus. So
Yeah.
I prayed like right then and there. I was like, something's going on. I want to stay loyal to you, not the guy
Mhm.
up there. Like there's something creepy going on here, and like I'm hearing weird stuff. Like, so it's
Mhm.
like you better help me figure this out to God,
Mhm.
like, and to
Yeah.
Jesus. And I was like, I want to stay loyal to Jesus, not to people, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I made that like contract at that time. And as soon as I came out, Kay Scott found me and she was like in tears and so upset because I think like she knew everything and I didn't know anything. And she thought I knew more than I did. And she was
Mhm.
listening too. And it was hurting her, like the things, some of the
Mhm.
ways that people were speaking and stuff.
Mhm.
So I didn't really understand, but she told me more, and I was like, "Whoa, there's more to this story than I've been told." And then I found like Elliot and Anita went to our. They're also on CCF. Went to our Union Sunday meeting, and they afterwards like helped me to understand more, and were willing to talk to me and stuff like that, and
Mhm.
talked to me on the phone and gave me time to like process things and stuff. So then
Mhm.
I started to talk to people in our meeting, like older people, like bringing it up, like that I was concerned. And every person I talked to, they would tell me more horrible stuff that happened in our area, like things that had happened within the last generation that were horrid. Like I'm not going to go into details.
Yeah.
People and workers that like had recently professed and were trying to convince me to come back. This is after I left. Every time I talked to people,
Mhm.
instead of like they were trying to convince me to come back, these older people,
Mhm.
but they would like feel that I was safe, and then
Mm.
they would tell me more horrific things, like that would make you even more terrified. So I felt like, really
Mhm.
conflicted because I was like, in a way, I was starting to feel close to the people going to meeting in such a real way, like because they were telling me their dirty laundry, and I was like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, you have dirty laundry too. Like it was like
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't know, like life is real for you too. Like people were
Yeah.
being intimate with me and raw with me and things that like they never really did before.
Yeah.
So I almost felt more bound to them,
Mm.
even
Mhm.
though it was like, wow, this is messed up, like this. But I
Yeah.
felt more bound to these human beings, like,
Yeah.
as humans and as people
Mm.
who want to follow God and like that I thought were
Mhm.
nice. So
Mhm.
um So it was a really weird experience. And then I also found out that like there's a person in our area who has gone to jail for being a pedophile to other
Mm.
children in meeting. And he was following me on Instagram. No one told me, like seeing my
Wow.
personal pictures. And like it was like, well, that seems like important information. So I like talked to the workers about it. I was like, when people have gone to jail for pedophilia, you can know that that's real, and you
Hmm.
can know that that's like a situation that you have to deal with, like for that person's sake and for everybody else's sake. So like you don't want that person to reoffend for their own soul's sake, right? Like,
Yeah.
and you don't want that any of their victims to have to be around them. And they were giving me like two of them said to me when I talked to two separate ones, and they said, well, we don't really know what's true. And I
Right.
was like, I literally have an article of when he got out of jail. Like, what is true then? If, like the law
Hmm.
wasn't, like how can you get more true? And I was just like, what is going on? Like, this is like that.
Hmm.
I was like starting to feel like this is intensely messed up at that point.
Yep.
And I had already told previous to that the workers my own, like, told my own story because I stopped wanting to go to gospel meetings. I stopped wanting to go to, I sometimes listened on the phone to lots of that stuff,
Mhm.
but I didn't want to physically go anymore. And so the only thing I was doing, I was not having workers in my house. They were really kind to me about that, but I felt like it was because I had been abused,
Okay.
like in their eyes. So, and that was like my ticket out. But I was like, no, everyone should be allowed, like, it doesn't
Mm.
matter. Like, sure, that's a part of my history, but that's everyone should be allowed to say no right now
Yeah.
because this is messed up, like
Yeah.
so that was basically an like very eye-opening, really brutal. I got on CCF, like I was on some of the calls, like I heard a lot of
Yeah.
more information. I finally found out about Dean Brewer. Like, so the last, I don't even know when the Dean Brewer thing happened, but my last convention was July 2023.
Hmm.
And I found out in the fall of 2023
Okay.
about Dean Brewer, like
Yeah.
on from CCF, like just
Yeah.
reading something. I have no idea. So like
Yeah.
that information was, and that took it to like such a different level because of what he was involved in. And then so that took it to a new level for me. And I was reading lots of survivor stories, but I was like having flashbacks, so I had to be careful. But I read about Rebecca.
Mm.
I forget her last name. I think it starts with a B. But anyways, she's not alive anymore. But she actually had pamphlets outside of conventions trying to tell about her father.
Oh, sure.
So I read her whole story, and that made total sense to me. And I had heard about her. People
Hmm.
had told me about her in a negative way. They said there's a girl. Can you believe there's a girl in the United States or somewhere, I forget, that
Hmm.
gives out pamphlets and is like against this beautiful convention. Like people had told me in a negative way about her.
Right.
So like when I read her story, I was like, yeah, I would be giving out
Mhm.
pamphlets too. And I actually told, because I'm friends with the convention owners here, and
Okay.
they know they've been very helpful in this situation. Like they've been as proactive as they can be, really
Mhm.
lovely. But I told them, like I might be out there with pamphlets some year because like this is getting messy. Like, and they
Yeah.
thought it like we were able to, what, that's what I mean. I felt closer to these people too
Yep.
because we were able to talk that way all of a
Yep.
sudden, not with
Yep.
everyone, but with some people,
Yep.
and see things from different perspectives for the
Mhm.
first time. I
Mhm.
realized that it was just the timing for me. Like I would have been a rebellious person in
Mhm.
meeting eyes. I would have been Rebecca, like I
Yeah.
just felt totally like I identified more with the survivors. Like in
Mhm.
every, like it just, I was them. Like I was like, and if I had been in their situation, I 100% would have behaved the same way. Like there was nothing wrong with any of that. Like, and so
Mhm.
I didn't understand why the workers were having trouble with that. Like, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? I was like,
Yeah.
obviously, like, so yeah, so that's basically that. Oh, and there was one final thing that happened that
Mm,
just like really changed everything. The elder in my meeting, who I adore, he's such a lovely old man, and he just recently lost his wife. So that was another thing going on. I felt like I love him. You know, I want to
mhm,
help him. And he's been,
mhm.
even though we have different ways of looking at things, he has been a kind person in my life and tried
Yeah.
his best from everything he knows. And I have, and though we don't agree, like I love him, you know. But he said after a meeting, he's one of the exclusive
Mhm.
people. So what happened was this this is a really sad story, but there was a funeral in our area for a young boy,
Mhm.
and he was in a divided home. So everyone that spoke, whether they went to meeting or not, had something beautiful to say, something that I found like helpful to my soul.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so after that funeral, I felt like a lot of hope because I felt like, oh, like, you know, people are getting along with other people who don't
Yeah.
go anymore, and like we can just like figure out where we belong. And
Yeah.
but then my elder said, um, after the Wednesday night meeting, after that, after the meeting was over, he said how he was talking to another man there, and like they could really sense the different spirit depending
Mm.
on like whether you were going or not going. I forget
Right.
exactly the way he said it, but it was really blunt and really tone deaf,
Mm.
considering it was for a child who
Yeah.
had died who was outside of meeting, and
Yeah.
that there was lots of children in the room who were friends with that child.
Mhm.
And I felt like I was gonna throw up or
Mhm.
scream or pass out, but I couldn't say anything. I saw one other adult nod what looked like agreement, and everybody else looked like they were either looking at me or him, like because I think they knew, some people knew that we were probably the most polar opposites in the room at that time. And so um like it was horrifying to me. Like I was like, I don't want my children hearing that. I was like, there's the only place that, okay, so I don't want to make him sound bad because I love
Mhm.
him. Okay. But the only
Mhm.
place that a comment like that would be appropriate is in a cult. Like
Mm.
that's what I realized. Like
Mhm.
you saying things like that after a funeral for a child, the only place that people would accept that is if you're in a cult. That's how it made me feel. And I was like, I'm accepting and I'm silent, but I also felt like I I didn't know the right way to approach it, that it wouldn't make it more toxic and more terrifying for the children. And I was really thinking about them.
Yeah.
So I just, so I, my friend who went to the meeting reached out to me afterwards and was like, so she said, we all talked about how weird that was. Like
Mhm.
with our children, we all talked about it. So
Mhm.
like you're not alone. And she's like, I try to remind myself that he was indoctrinated, you know,
Mm.
like, and I was like, yeah, like that I totally agree with that. Like that's how I feel too. And you know, there's a lot of religions that I've experienced sort of like that. So in
Yeah.
my lifetime, and I've accepted, you know, but I'm not going to choose it for myself and my children.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like, and I feel like, well, how did he become indoctrinated? Because he sat in rooms silent while people said that,
Okay. Yeah.
right? So I was just like, so I was like, this is not safe for my kids. Like I'm feeling that way, but I also was still staying because I was like, okay, people, my husband wasn't always there for all these experiences, so he was way behind me. We
Mm.
had people that couldn't go. I felt like if we didn't have our house open. So I did continue to go, but like it got to the point where I really felt like they were reading not the same thing as me a lot of the time,
Yeah.
except for maybe one other person in the room, like my friend.
Mhm.
So, and I felt like there was a focus on like still self-denial, but not what I would call self, because I think of
Mhm.
self-denial as like if you're in an argument with someone taking the low road, like being like, oh, I'm trying to see it through your eyes. Like that's dying to self. Like
Mhm.
um trying to live through another person's eyes is dying to self.
Mhm.
Trying to fulfill all the law by actually treating someone like you would yourself. That's dying to self.
Yeah.
So to me, I was still hearing the meeting dying to self. I was hearing a lot more stuff that felt like not coming from a genuine place, but it might have just been because I was tired of
Mhm.
all of you know what I mean? Like I felt like this is not edifying for me. I might not be edifying for others. I felt like I had to fight when with my testimony. Like I was trying to prove a point sometimes,
Yeah.
and I felt wrong like about that too. So I just
Yeah.
was like, that's when I wrote my exit letter. I was like, this is becoming unedifying for everyone involved, and I still love everyone, and they
Mhm.
still love me. Let's
Yeah.
keep it like that. So
Yeah.
that was the end for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I felt immediately less anxious, better.
Mhm.
So, and I haven't, like at first, I felt like, oh, I can go back if
Mhm.
something like it's not that I was too proud or offended.
Yeah.
So it's like I didn't mind having to go through some process again.
Yep.
Yeah, so I was like, it wouldn't have hurt my feelings or anything to have to if I felt like that was what God was asking me to do.
Right.
But yeah, I felt like more and more sure that it was the right choice as time went on, as I read my Bible, like more by
Yeah.
myself. I don't feel in any rush to go to like another church.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe that will happen. I mean, I'm open to it if it feels right. The only thing like that I always go back to is like Matthew 7, where Jesus is speaking and he says, like, it starts off like with don't judge.
Mhm.
And so like that's always been so important to me. And I feel like it's really missing from meetings. And I gave my testimony about that because I feel like it's a problem for me too, but I
Mhm.
felt like we should all feel like it's a problem for us,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because it is. So,
Yeah.
anyways, and so, but then it goes on and it says, do for other people the same things you want them to do for you. This is the meaning of the law of Moses and the teaching of the prophets. And so, like, I feel like
Mhm.
my original concept of fellowship, even though I didn't have all the pieces together, was actually right.
Yeah.
And then right after that, he says, enter through the narrow gate. Like, how narrow is that to
Mhm.
have to treat others the way you would want to be treated? We're all bad at it. It's very
Yes.
narrow. We all
Uh-huh.
need to repent every day about that. But it is something that someone paralyzed can do,
Yeah.
someone that never read the Bible can do,
Mhm.
someone, do you know what I mean? So for
I do.
me, it aligns with my life experience to
Yes.
believe what Jesus said, like to
Yes.
believe what he
Yeah.
said there and to believe that that's the narrow gate. So, like,
Yeah.
whenever, because my meeting brain comes back, like the thing, because you do hear things. So, whenever that comes back, I read that and I'm like, yeah, like I can find myself again and I can find myself in my own life and my own experiences. I just have to I have certain like things that just like are so sure that I
Yeah.
just hold on to for
Yeah.
my because I can't go outside of that because
Mhm.
my whole life, everything that I prayed for in meeting, it opened up like
Mhm.
to everything I had problems with was exposed, like
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah.
That's my whole
Oh,
story.
Julia, it's so incredible to hear about your big, beautiful story that's so unique. And the thing that's so inspiring is these anchors that have kept you along your journey. And it's like them being true today as they were when you were young is so
Yeah.
inspiring.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for listening to the whole thing. I'm fine if you edit out things if it gets too long or anything,
No,
but yeah,
I feel
thank
like,
you.
yeah, I feel like it's also important in the story. It's incredibly fascinating. It was
It
incredibly
was hard
beautiful.
to choose.
Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you so much, Whitney, and thank you for taking time to listen.
Oh, absolutely. It was an honor. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.